of Joe Biden, which of course is in bed with China. So they seem to just play the card of Joe being constantly, cognitively speaking, not present, and coming up with a series of lies also regarding his connection with the Jewish faith, because he said a couple of days ago to a bunch of rabbis that he was actually involved with the civil rights movement in the 60s and with the Jewish people. Something that is a complete lie, because he admitted in 1987 in an interview that he was actually simply working in a swimming pool with black people as a lifeguard. That was his involvement with the civil rights movement. He was definitely not a friend of Martin Luther King or marching up and down the road. He actually admitted that in 1987, but he seems to have forgotten what he goes back on his old lies and he pushes them. Then at one point, when he was in front of these rabbis, his brain completely frozen after he started to talk about how he convinced a rabbi to go and marry, because his daughter married with a Jewish gentleman, who is apparently, he said, you know, the dream of every father is to marry, the Catholic father is to marry your daughter with a Jewish doctor. And then he went on saying, but he was, I think he said he was a neurosurgeon, not I mean, what kind of doctor did he want? I don't know. I mean, completely insane. Then he said, no, but I convinced the rabbi that I needed this hymn in the church. So they managed to have this ceremony in the oldest Catholic church. Is that possible for the Jewish faith to do something like that?
Well, I mean, in Judaism, there's different observance levels. You know, there's the Reform observance level, which is more closer to, let's say, Christianity. Yeah. And then there's the other side of the spectrum is the ultra-Orthodox, which is the Hasidic, the Payas, you know, the black hat, you know, and they're dancing around, and you know, you've seen the Satmar types, you know. So, you know, there's a lot of different levels of observance, but in strict Judaism, that would be a no.
Okay, because in the strict Judaism, it will not really be permitted, I guess, to marry outside of Judaism.
Right, exactly.
But in this case, there was a co-celebration of both a Catholic priest and a Jewish rabbi. So more of a
that's more of a reform or reconstructionist kind of Judaism.
However, his brain at one point frozen. He said he admitted himself, sorry, my brain is gone blank, and he kind of had a moment really that was rather embarrassing. But I mean, that wasn't the only embarrassing moment of this week for Joe Biden, that went from one catastrophe to the other. And Kamala Harris in all this is nowhere to be seen. I mean, it's not even present, as we have all noticed. I mean, in a moment of great crisis, instead of sending her to Afghanistan, he sent her to Vietnam. He was probably 45 years later, 46, I don't know. It was like, he probably got the wrong war, and so
exactly, because everyone was comparing the fall of Saigon to the fall of Kabul.
Yes, I said, okay, let's send Kamala to Saigon, and then Kamala was affected by instead what was happening in Hanoi, the capital there of Vietnam, wherever she was going, which was basically an attack known as an Havana syndrome attack. Now, we have mentioned it in the past. I don't know if you know a little bit about this topic. It seems like it's been called Havana syndrome because since 2016, these kind of attacks first started in the embassy in Cuba, in Havana. There were also ulterior attacks in China and in Vienna. The symptoms, of course, are very catastrophic for the person who is affected by it. I mean, I read about the symptoms. It seems very serious. But the kind of weapon is, of course, an unconventional weapon, a magnetic, probably, force that is pushed towards the brain. Have you reached a conclusion on this topic?
Well, and people know that at the embassies, the Marines actually protect the embassy. So you have guards, the guards are the Marines.
Sure.
There are cases of Marine guards actually having this Havana syndrome. When they do the CT scan, they actually, it shows a head injury, almost like a football player, you know, with the repeated head injuries that one would have. So this Havana syndrome is not just psychological, it's physiological, and it's showing like deep concussion, you know, and like almost like a PTSD kind of syndrome that comes off of it.
So, of course, there was an alarm issued that delayed apparently the trip from Singapore to Vietnam of Kamala. Aside from that, the Pope Francis issued a statement on Afghanistan. He actually said that we shouldn't try to culturally colonize in any way countries like Afghanistan, blah, blah, blah. In any way, he was claiming that this statement was made by Angela Merkel. In reality, he was quoting Vladimir Putin. He got it wrong. I guess that the Pope, also cognitively speaking, is losing a little bit. But the Pope is also affected apparently by cancer, a cancer of the colon. I mean, he has been operated at the colon. And what I heard is that after this operation at the colon, that's what I wanted to ask you, the operation has unleashed more cancer cells into the system. And apparently he might give up on his papacy soon. That is what has been talked about, of course, by the media. But the topic of why he's leaving is a health issue, of course, a very bad health issue connected with this possible cancer. What do you think?
Well, I mean, that could be, you know, without having the actual history and the slides to actually prove the colon cancer. If you catch, you know, someone high profile. See, the thing is, a high profile guy like that probably would have been highly, you know, looked after really well. So I'm shocked that he would have had an advanced stage of it. You know, these polyps take years to turn into.
After undergone a colon surgery. Now, how realistic is that a colon surgery? Then it's like.
Did they remove parts of his colon, or just remove polyps from the colon?
Well, apparently he undergone this surgery. I don't know to what extent they removed some parts of the colon. That's what I had.
Well, I mean, normally when someone has colon cancer, it's usually a polyp that's been growing for more than 5 years. And it's staged. So, you know, depending on how much it grows into certain tissues, depends on what stage you're in, stage 1, stage 2.
Seems pretty strange that it's the first time he's admitted to hospital since his arrival.
Right. He's what, 80 or late 70s?
Over 80. Yeah, he's over.
Yeah. So he would have been having a colonoscopy every 3 years or every 2 years. So they would take out the polyp once it was growing, and then, you know, and it's managed that way. So it's kind of odd to see that, well, they missed something during the screening, the colonoscopy screening for a high profile guy like that. That kind of seems odd. So it leads me to believe that maybe it's true that he has some colon issue, you know, polyps, maybe some cancer, but this is a way for him to exit out, give a reason for the exit.
Well, of course, but we know that he wanted to exit, and I have talked about it for years, because, of course, now he has still Ratzinger there. It would be a bit odd to have another Pope resigning. But they talked about a potentially painful bowel condition. What is that?
Well, there's two types, two main types: the irritable bowel syndrome and irritable bowel disease. So he might have had the irritable bowel disease, and that could manifest into some sort of cancer.
He had the left part of his bowel removed.
The left part. Well, yeah. So he might have had IBD, and then eventually ended up getting, you know, polyps that turn, more aggressive cancer.
Now he's 84.
He probably has multiple polyps, multiple lesions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's 84. It's quite normal that a guy of his age experiences certain kind of problems. But only about 10 to 20% of people with similar problems actually require surgery, from what I know, at least from what I read.
Well,
So,
the thing is it's about screening. If you screen, normally in the United States, they want to try to start screening at age 45. If you don't have family history, if you do have family history, then, anywhere from 25 to 30. And if it's family history, then it's every 2 years. And you catch the polyp early and you're okay. It's managed that way. It takes for it to be like really deadly, it takes the arc from polyp to cancer is about 8 years. So as long as if you have regular screening, you should be okay. But the added complication is if they have IBD or IBS, and there's when you have like a chronic inflammation in any organ, but especially in the colon, if you have a chronic kind of situation, it can lead down the road of cancer. And that mutation, there are about 3 things have to happen to go wrong for colon cancer to really take hold. And he's of an age where there's probably some mutation already. The older you are, the more mutations you have.
The operation was described by the rectal surgery specialist of Yale University, Dr. Walter Longo, as a major operation. It's also been said by Dr. Manish Chand, who is an associate professor of surgery at the University College of London, specializing in colorectal surgery, that basically the Pope might have had some pains, some painful symptoms long before the actual procedure.
That's the point I'm making, is just that through proper screening, this should have been caught 5 years ago. That's the point I'm making. So why wasn't it caught?
Why wasn't it caught? So you think there was some lack of competence? That
it may lack of competence, or there was an issue during the screening, and the treatment decision was not to treat. Sometimes we don't know the full story here, but we know that there is some inner issues going on within the church. We know that, right?
Well, yeah, of course.
And this might be an excuse to exit out, go stage left.
Of course, there is the possibility that he needs an excuse, but I mean, his health is pretty frail. If you see him walking, he's not always been reflecting great health. I mean, it wasn't like the John Paul II before the shooting, that there was a guy healthy from the beginning of his papacy, going to the swimming pool, playing tennis and all that. He was never that way. He's always kind of dragged himself along, as kind of frail health. Like I said, he seems to talk about Afghanistan mostly because he wants to in some way justify the fact that, of course, the US left Afghanistan, but mostly also to condemn the fact that the US was there in the first place, without, of course, counting the fact that now the Afghans are left in the hands of a bunch of troglodytes, barbarian, incivil people called Taliban. I mean, the Taliban, though, like I said earlier, they claim they're going to be financed by China. So everything is going to go fine. Today, actually, the first commercial flight left as an internal flight in Afghanistan, from Kabul airport. It seems like Qatar and Turkey are helping very much the Taliban in this phase. We know that the actual head of what's his name, Mullah Beretar, he was actually, I think, he went to Qatar. I mean, there is links with Qatar. So there must be some financing, and also, of course, interests that connect Qatar, Turkey, and of course, China. And what is known as, of course, the new Silk Road. In fact, the spokesperson of the Taliban said, we are interested in the Silk Road. The Silk Road. People don't understand, for those who maybe don't know much about history, it went through Afghanistan, though that was a long time ago. So Now we have, of course, a country with the Taliban very well armed, courtesy of the US taxpayer, while Joe Biden administration goes after the Second Amendment and after our own guns. He actually has given billions of dollars of equipment to the Taliban. And guns, pistols. So if you are a Taliban, you can actually get away with actually getting all kinds of weapons from the US military, while instead here in the US, they are taking the guns away from the population. This is also something that kind of doesn't really sound very good and very brilliant. But I mean, it's always the Democrats that are, by the way, fighting also a very important war here in California. Larry Elder against Governor Newsom. Of course, I already see a little bit of fraud in the air, pools that I think are manipulated, a lot of fake news from, of course, all the mainstream outlets here in California. Larry Elder, the face of white supremacy, is actually a black man. He's very black. More black than Larry Elder you can't get. So I mean, to actually have Governor Newsom, the face of white supremacy, because Governor Newsom is the face of white supremacy. Let's be true. The real white supremacy, the KKK, was founded by the Democrats. And it's like Nancy Pelosi, Governor Newsom, these people are the face of white supremacy. Let's be honest once and for all about it. No,
that's right. That's absolutely right.
I mean, it's like we are finding ourselves in a world which is upside down, where it seems like you say things that are the complete opposite of what you are.
We're living in literally 1984. I mean, everything is upside down and inverted with double speak and double meaning.
And then we have the COVID reality, of course, the COVID reality. It goes on, and it's never-ending lockdowns, impositions, but most of all restrictions, and now the mandating the vaccine more and more. But finally, this week, Israel is the demonstration that you can vaccinate the whole population, and actually you make your country the worst hotspot in the world. This week, Israel becomes the worst hotspot for COVID in the world. Can you please explain our viewers, our listeners, what's happening here?
I and Dr. Malone believe that Dr. Malone is the one that was one of the inventors for the messenger RNA platform. I did a show with him for 3 hours.
Quite known because
right. I did a 3-hour show with him on my channel, and he's a nice guy. He's a very nice guy. Him and I, agree that there is this thing called antibody-dependent enhancement. And what happens is that, and it's multi-layered. There's multiple things going on here. But for the average person to understand antibody-dependent enhancement, it's you have antibodies either from the natural infection or through the vaccine. In this case, the vaccine, and those antibodies help for the variant Delta to actually get into the cells. Now, there's a lot of biology behind that and why that happens, but it actually helps promote the infection. So that is very worrisome, and the control group in the world is really Israel, because it has a very high compliance for the vaccine. A big part of the population has the messenger RNA platform. So that's kind of a control group in itself. And we are seeing that individuals vaccinated get Delta and they end up getting in the hospital. So this story on CNN saying it's only the unvaccinated is total BS. It is the vaccinated group too. Now, the question is, what do we do about it? I personally believe this. We have to, and it's it's a bitter pill that we're going to have to swallow. There's only two options here. We have to push through what I call D-Day, and we just stop the masks, stop the lockdowns and the crazy social distancing, and just push through, and there's natural infection that takes place. A lot of people are going to get sick. The hospitals are getting inundated with cases, but they're going to have to suck it up, because that is the only way that we're going to have to get this thing burning through the society. We can couple that strategy with treating with therapeutics that are on the market now, all of them. That includes the hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and remdesivirs.
Right. Of course,
all of them.
Now Joe Rogan is tested negative yesterday after a week after having COVID. Treated it with ivermectin. How you spell it?
Ivermectin.
Ivermectin, yeah. Ivermectin,
right.
Of course, use also some, I think, some of that monoclonal antibodies. Maybe he probably used.
He might have also had the Regeneron monoclonal antibody. Yeah, that's what Trump had was the monoclonal antibody.
So the ivermectin is actually, I read some studies made in Mexico. One of the states in Mexico that actually uses ivermectin seems to have the lower cases of COVID. It's a great drug.
Right.
What's the problem with this drug? Doesn't make a big pharma?
It's right, exactly. The thing is that there's tools in the toolbox. It's not just one thing. It's a multitude of things, and we should use in a crisis all the tools. If there was emergency provisions for vaccines, then there should be emergency provisions for other therapeutics, especially when there's data to suggest that they work. Now, so we have therapeutics for treatment. We push through with D-Day, where we just push through and stop the social distancing BS. And then the other leg of this, for ones that want it, not mandated, but for ones that want it, instead of having one type of vaccine, epitope, so we have like multiple vaccines, right? But it's the same S1 subunit. And this is where Dr. Bosch is coming from, that if we keep on vaccinating with the same epitope, then eventually what's going to happen is we're going to be hardwired to the old version of SARS-CoV-2. And our memory cells will want to produce, when we get a new variant in our body, let's say Delta, the memory cells will produce the antibodies for the old, and it won't be as effective in creating new antibodies to Delta and activate naive beta cells. They'll just keep on activating B cells. It'll activate memory B cells and not naive B cells. So because of that, we are moving into something called the Hoskins effect, which basically means our immune system will go down and not be as effective to new variants, because they're cookie cuttering everything. So the better policy is if we're going to have a vaccine program, that we need to tool for Delta in the United States and stop new vaccines administration to individuals that have no vaccine at all. If they want the vaccine, they should get a Delta one, not the old epitope. The ones that have had the vaccine and want it, it may be prudent, if their titers are low, to have a booster, only if they want it. Now, again, I don't believe in mandates for vaccines at all. It's a choice. But the scientific community needs to have boosters for the ones that have had the vaccine, so they can get their titers up a little higher. But more importantly is the ones that have not been vaccinated, I personally believe that the scientific evidence is suggesting ADE and Hoskins effect. And if that is the true, because of what's going on in Israel, I believe that the Delta variant vaccine needs to come out. And that if people want it, they take the Delta variant vaccine, and therefore we have a heterogeneous set of different types of epitopes, antibodies for different types of epitopes in the society in the United States, and therefore will be more effective in fighting other variants. When everyone is the same, it is walking down the path of the Hoskins effect, and a disaster is going to happen. And that is what happened during the Spanish flu. The ones that fared better during the Spanish flu were the older generation that had an infection in 1880.
Okay, let me rewind here a second, going back to the fact that Israel this week becomes the world hotspot. Back in June, the scientists were still claiming all the lies regarding the natural origins of the virus, jump from an animal to another, and all that BS. And plus, they put in the midst also the climate change agenda, the fact that in the future we will find the hotspots in the third world countries. Now, in the third world countries where they don't do all these vaccinations, it seems like they're actually better, or not? In third world countries, maybe they arrange themselves with a bit of hydroxychloroquine, a bit of this and that.
Right. That's right, exactly. That's the point I'm making. This is a three-pronged approach.
They create maybe
it's a
reaction from the
and the part of the reason why is that they're using therapeutics. Part of the reason is that they're natural. They're at the societal level. They are getting different types of antibodies, so they're not all the same antibody to the original version through the vaccine, right? So early on in infection, they may have gotten alpha. Later in the year, they may have gotten delta. So their population is going to have a different wiring in their immune system for these different variants. And so you get this heterogeneous effect. Everyone that's taken a vaccine everyone is wired to the old version. We're not wired to delta. There is cross reactivity. There is some, neutralization, but that dwindles because of the variant delta, and the titers start to go down. So it's more prudent to have heterogeneous epitopes in the society and produce antibodies off of those than a cookie cutter one S1 subunit type that the vaccines that are right in the market right now in the United States, everyone is making antibodies that are to the same epitope, which is stupid. Knowing now what we know about Delta, having everyone on the same epitope is dumb. That's dumb. And that we're going down a road where we may actually see in a few years the crisis being 3 or 4 times worse than it is now, because of we were hardwiring based on one template. So to your point, the ones that are like third world, they're doing the natural infection, they're getting a heterogeneous set of antibodies. They're using what's cheap on the market, which is this hydroxychloroquine and this ivermectin. Some countries have access to remdesivir, some don't. Very few of these third world countries have the monoclonal antibody access. It's pretty expensive. And they have some level of vaccine program. That is the right mix. Now, we have to be honest. Ones that don't take the vaccine will fare worse on average than ones that do. But the data that's coming in from Israel is saying that just because you get a vaccine does not mean you're not going to be hospitalized. And as the titers go down, you have a higher probability of having a severe infection. Now, I wanted to pivot. I have on this board here this long COVID syndrome. And there's 3 hypotheses that are there, and they may be a mixture. There's the autoimmune hypothesis for long COVID. There is the blood hypothesis and the neuro hypothesis, all right? And it could be an amalgamation, a little bit of a mix. I'm coming from the standpoint that either the vaccine or the natural infection for the long hauler syndrome is autoimmune disorder. The antibodies that are being created are attacking cells and organelles within the cell. The blood hypothesis is that through this natural infection or the vaccine injury, you start seeing this vascular leakage because of inflammation. And what happens is that for the long haulers, they don't have enough energy. So what happens is your vascular system will dilate and constrict when it needs to provide nutrients and oxygen levels at the proper time. But when it's inflamed, it can't do that. It can't adjust the vascular system. So what happens is that these long haulers, their organs cannot get the oxygen levels that they need. And then the neuro hypothesis is that the actual neurons are being attacked, and therefore your sympathetic and parasympathetic system is out of whack and not controlling your heart rate properly or your breathing properly. And that's what's wearing you down. And it could be a combination of things. Most of my focus is on the autoimmune disorder. Now, we got to keep this in mind that when we have the Hoskins effect take place, that stimulates the cytotoxic T cells to produce more inflammatory cytokines. It's what we call the cytokine storm. All right, that produces that autoimmune issue, produces the blood issue, the inflammation, the inflammatory response, and the vascular leakage, and the blood clotting and the hemorrhaging in the brain and all this other stuff. So we have to really pay attention that vaccines can, has lower probability, but can produce long hauler COVID on top of the natural infection through the conduit of autoimmune disorder, through the Hoskins effect and the antibody-dependent enhancement. So that's why it's so important to have a multiple-legged approach: therapeutics, natural infection, and those therapeutics, treated early, really bring down the severity of those cases, and then a vaccine program that's smart, where it's heterogeneous with epitopes, not homogeneous. And we should get past this. But unfortunately, the way the medical establishment is, more boosters. Every time your titer goes down, more boosters, and everything, right? You talk to a medical professional that has been in the industry for, let's say, 2 or 3 decades, and they've been forced to take vaccines because they, let's say, work in the ER. These professionals, the nurses and the doctors, will have to admit that for some vaccines that they're forced to take, they no longer can get the higher titer levels when they get the booster. Because what happens when you habitually give boosters, like for Hep B, you can't get to your original levels. You wane down your titers, and then you get a booster, it'll come back up, but it's never to where it was with the first booster. And your response level goes down because it's habitual. The body is adapting and saying, I don't want this damn shot.
But I mean, their idea is to create a yearly booster, no?
Right. But the thing is most people are paying attention. Most people are hearing Fauci just saying, or the CDC saying, just get a booster. But if you pay attention to what the medical professionals that have been in the field for 2 years,
they say not to get it.
Right. That's the point I'm making. Is that there's evidence to suggest that habitual boosters actually weakens your immune system.
It's a little bit ability constantly antibiotics. They eventually will.
Yes. Right. Your body adapts and says, I don't want to make any more antibodies because it has memory cells. So the body's saying, I have memory cells, leave me alone. That's basically what they're doing. So the dogma that is happening with habitual boosters is wrong. It's just the thinking is wrong.
Well, but I mean,
yes, you need boosters for certain vaccines up to a certain point, but habitual boosters is going to lead you down the Hoskins road. 100%. It will give you Hoskins. So we probably will hear in the news. This is my prediction, Leo. we'll probably hear in the news that everyone that had a vaccine will need a booster, and it's going to be off the old epitope to boost up your antibodies.
But aside
but after that booster, I don't think people should take one booster. Yes. 2 or more boosters? No. You know, like, so if you're in the Moderna category,
I don't think
3.
they should even take one booster. I mean, I think if they went through the process of already getting vaccinated, which is something that some people like you have done, I mean,
right.
Now you have got the.
I wanted to just draw something.
Johnson? What was it? Johnson and
Yeah.
Johnson.
Yeah.
Now Johnson is talking about a booster. Johnson and Johnson.
Right. I'm gonna show you. You can see the screen, right? So
sure.
so when you, like, say Johnson and Johnson, what happened is that first shot. This is your IgG, okay? And then it weans down, okay? And this is your level of antibodies, okay? Level of antibodies, LA, all right? A booster is going to do this and give you a higher level of IgG, okay? The problem comes in. That's fine. That works okay. So a booster for Johnson & Johnson makes sense, all right? Now let's look at what happened with Moderna, okay? Moderna, they did this. They gave you 2, so you're at this level, okay? Now you drop down, okay? Now what will happen when you do the booster is that it'll go back to a lower level than your max, but higher than your minimum. And if they keep on doing that, you will slow your max for the booster will slowly go down and down and down and down. So this is why I said boosters make sense if your IgG goes down to a certain level, but only one time. So messenger RNA, you need 2 shots to get to the proper IgG. In Johnson & Johnson, it's debatable if 1 or 2 was really needed. Okay, but if you do 4 or 5 or 6 boosters, you're going to have a higher probability of a non-responsive titer level. And individuals that have been taking Hep B all the time or the MMR, they are seeing this effect that I'm talking about. So in the news, this is what I'm predicting. They're going to say, take the booster once everyone has the 1 epitope vaccine, because the WHO is saying don't take the booster because in their mind not enough people took the first shot. So they have a horse in the race and what they're trying to do. But in the news they're going to say take the booster to bring up your IgGs. But when you take that third shot from Moderna and it's the same epitope, chances are you're not going to you'll reach your max IgG. You'll probably reach a lower level. And your body will eventually, for many people, maybe not all, but many people, it'll become less and less and less responsive as they keep on giving you more and more and more of the same booster. And this is a problem. This adds to the probability of antibody-dependent enhancement.
Okay, but in all this catastrophe of the Biden administration and all that is happening, we have though literally forgot about the famous report about the origins of the virus, because if we have to start from somewhere, we have to start from understanding what we are fighting here. So if this is a bacteriological war, we need to fight it, of course, with some people have said actually that the vaccines seems to actually amplify this bacteriological warfare. And
well,
so
the vaccines are amplifying it because through antibody-dependent enhancement.
Yeah,
that's exactly what Malone and myself are saying. But so I don't think that they designed the vaccine to be that way.
Integrating part of this constant bacteriological warfare on mankind to eliminate part of the human population. Now, some people like the Nobel Prize winner Montagnier, famous doctor in France, said that in the next few years we will see a lot of people dying from these vaccines. What do you think about Montagnier hypothesis?
Well, the ones, you know, we may be
Luc Montagnier,
seeing,
I don't know if you know Luc Montagnier, if you ever heard about him. I mean, he's very famous. I mean, he was the recipient of the 2008 Nobel Peace Prize in Medicine.
I don't think we're going to see, the way I'd say it is that our body is being somewhat damaged because we're being hardwired to a certain epitope. And because of that, our responsiveness to something that emerges from SARS-CoV-2, another variant that's even worse than Delta, our response, our ability to adapt to it becomes less. That's my concern. So if you want to say that the vaccine caused the deaths because of that, then yes. But the deaths technically would come from a new variant that we're not responding to. So that's how I see this. You know, I'm concerned about autoimmune disorder, either through the natural infection or the vaccine. Both can give you autoimmune disorder. And then the damage that's taking place when we're only giving the same kind of vaccine for a vaccine program. If someone wants it, I'm still about choice. So, you know, the medical establishment should never tell a patient what you have to do because that's against the Nuremberg Code. So, you know, I don't believe in that, the medical technocracy at all. Even if they say, well, it's just to save lives. You know what? Freedom of choice, self-determination is more important than scientific technocracy.
Well, scientific technocracy, though, wants to impose on us the COVID vaccine passport, the green pass, as they call it in Europe, for a reason, for transforming gradually our society in what has already been experimented in China, which is the credit score system for each citizen, and the fact that they can basically track them down everywhere they go. So it's like this is the more disturbing part of this whole global experiment which is being conducted on us, and that of course we are the victims. We don't really know how to get out of it. Do you think we will be able to get out of it? There is enough resistance to this global scheme, or?
Well, I think, you know, unfortunately, I have the pessimistic view that we missed the opportunity last summer to really push and say no. I think that we are going down a road where we lost that opportunity. It may be I did a video on this, you know, we were supposed to be a great generation, Leo, just like the greatest generation during World War II had to step up and do something and fight the Nazis, right? Our generation, Gen X, we had the opportunity to be a great generation and stop this tyranny. Unfortunately, I believe that we missed that opportunity last summer, and that it's very possible that we have to go through one generation of hell, of tyranny, and a generation is born out of that, and then they fight the tyranny. So we may have to go through one generation of this before there's enough tension in utero to create this fever pitch in the society to fight the government, to fight the tyranny. Because we're talking about things like stopping these civil liberties being eroded, but not just a conversation with Congress, not just a conversation to the White House, and not just a conversation in the judicial branch. It's literally an armed conflict, a civil war. because they won't stop. They will keep on jabbing you. And unfortunately, people weren't paying attention to the doctors and the nurses that were warning what they had to experience the last 10 years of continual boosters, continual vaccines, continual erosion of their profession, and it being gobbled up by, these conglomerates and the insurance companies. We are becoming a unit, a unit of economic transfer. We're not being viewed as human beings with civil liberties, and self-determination. We're being viewed as these economic units. And then as soon as you become less viable as an economic unit, then they want you gone, right? So we have to stand up, and we need a great generation to do what the greatest generation did in the 40s. Unfortunately, I just don't think that Gen X has it. It's almost there. It's almost there, but we're just not willing to go that extra level of conflict to say no to the government. And because of that, we are going to have the tyranny. There's not enough people saying, no, we're not going to do the forced vaccines. We're not going to do the forced masks. And for example, I'll give you a microcosm of what's going on with my medical school. All right, so we have to do I'm on campus, okay? So we have to do on-site activities like PE skills, clinical history of a patient, and anatomy class, and test taking has to be on site, not remote. Well, when you're on site, you have to have PE, okay? Now that makes sense with the patient, that makes sense in anatomy, but why during a test center do you need to be wearing a mask? There's social distancing between the cubicles when you're taking your test. They have proctors walking around to make sure you're not cheating. So why do you have to be wearing a mask? Now, the student body could just say this, no. But the problem is there's not enough of the student body saying no. And so therefore, what happens is the school just keeps on pushing more and more on the student. Now that's the little microcosm on a medical student. The medical student's going, oh, I'm so grateful to be in medical school, right? And I'll do whatever you want so I can be a doctor. Right now, extrapolate that at the societal level. If we don't have enough people, enough Joe Plumbers and enough Susies out there saying no to the government will continue to erode and push, and there will be scope creep. And unfortunately, there's not enough people that are willing to galvanize and say no. If there was a larger population saying no in the mass, this would not happen. There would be not vaccine mandates, and there wouldn't be mask mandates. And it's the same thing that happened with Obamacare. If you remember, when they rolled out Obamacare, everyone had to log in into the website if they wanted this, if they didn't have private insurance through their company. If people during the rollout of Obamacare said no in mass, then Obamacare would have fell flat on its face, because Congress would have been worried that the ones that are in office that had their seat in Congress would lose it in the next election, and Obamacare would have been gone. But instead, we had people that capitulated, just like the medical students in my medical school capitulated for mask wearing. Now, people want to wear masks. That's their business, but it shouldn't be a mandate. It shouldn't be, especially when there's not strong evidence that masks really work. So that's my take. Is that our generation was supposed to be a great generation. Unfortunately, we just did not galvanize in mass to say no. And now we're paying the cost. We're paying the price of not acting. And it's our fault. It's our fault. The bottom line, the ones that are listening, it's our fault. The Gen Xers out there, it's our fault that we have mask mandates, not Fauci's, and it's vaccine mandates. It's our fault. The Gen Xers' fault, because because we did not galvanize and say no in mass. So stop, people need to stop blaming Fauci, and we need to look in the mirror and actually say, you know what, it's our fault. And because we didn't work in mass.
Some people would say to you, we have been frauded. Our election process has not been as clear as it should have. Maybe Larry Elder here in California will make a difference in starting to overturn the whole process of libtarding this once beautiful nation of America. That's why I have some hope that at least we can win here in California and give a different example. Though I must say that I have hope, but at the same time I'm seeing polls that are not really honest, fake news that are being used to support this governor. And of course, it's once again a repeat of what we have already seen with Joe Biden. So, and the national election of the president of the United States, that was definitely, some people say that in any case, it was all transparent and that in the end Joe Biden won this election, but there is a lot of doubts, we know, and there is a lot of suspicions that still people have. There is still actually, even in Georgia, I read some video testimony now of ballots that were thrown in the plant in the middle of the night in favor of Biden and so on. But we are not even allowed to say these things anymore because we get immediately blocked. It's all part of a package. You can't criticize Fauci and the COVID establishment. You can't criticize the possibility that the elections were not really conducted in an honest way. You can't really criticize even this whole Afghanistan debacle because already the mainstream media in the last week is starting to follow this fake news pushed by Joe Biden that this was the greatest airlift in history. We managed to bring out a lot of people. It was a great success. And so,
my take on the whole Afghanistan thing, we failed. We lost the war. We spent $1 trillion and lost the war and lost the peace. Not just we lost the war, we lost the peace too. And, the thing is that I heard the number that we airlifted out Afghanis, 124,000. Now, how many interpreters do you need over 20 years? It's not 124,000, even if you're bringing the whole family with you. There's more than just the translators that's on that plane. And I suspect that what's going to happen is there's going to be a sleeper cell that starts. And there's going to be a new ramp up of an attack, new terrorist attacks in the United States, possibly in Europe. If you remember back in the 70s and the early 80s, all the cafes getting blown up in Europe. I see that kind of thing, that sort of thing happening again, a resurgence of ISIS. And then what it does, it opens up the door for Biden going to Syria.
We have given the possibility of creating the biggest terrorist supporting country in the history of mankind. Before, we had always like small enclaves, no? Maybe Palestine in the 70s was used to train terrorists around the world, as you remember. Then you had also Northern Ireland, but you never had a whole country with now great military asset, courtesy of the US taxpayer, finally capable of supporting not only ISIS-K, but Al-Qaeda and many other groups. So
that's why I use the phrase, I can't tell who the enemy is. I really don't know who the enemy is, because it seems like our hands are so in all of this, in the Taliban. We helped the Taliban, we helped ISIS, we helped Al-Qaeda.
In the last few days, we saw New Zealand locking down the whole country for one case of COVID. New Zealand now in one day got a bunch of people stabbed in a supermarket by somebody they were monitoring for years. But because they're so polite, they can't use any other force, that because they have these lip-tarded rules that affect countries like New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and most of the Commonwealth countries, unfortunately, they let them be. And like you said, the next thing will be that we're going to go back into a series of terrorist attacks, and it's already starting. It's already happening in New Zealand. So, I mean, a country where nobody is allowed to go around because of COVID sees a fundamentalist Muslim who was known to the authorities stabbing a bunch of people. It's crazy. I mean, these people are insane. They are now coming up with the idea to give money to not shoot people in San Francisco. What does it mean that? What does it mean? Do I have to buy a pistol and then go to the guy? Sorry, I wanted to shoot that, but if you give me $300, I'm not going to shoot it. That's a great idea. How much money are you going to give me if I don't shoot that guy? I mean, it's like, are they insane? I mean, the insanity is rampant here in California, especially in San Francisco. We saw in the last few months, people can go inside shops and steal everything up to $1,000, not above $1,000. Now we're gonna be paying people to not shoot other people. Fantastic. I mean, what kind of crazy world is this?
Right. I mean, it's becoming lawless. It's the Wild West again. It's lawless. Streets of New York are really declining because of the mismanagement of de Blasio and his relationship with the NYPD. You got drug addicts all over the place. You have, Asian hate crime that's happening. You have a lot of anti-Semitism that's happening. You have a lot of purses being stolen now. People, 34th Street, which was all clean for the last 12, 15 years, it's a disaster now. It's like a war zone, especially around Macy's. So I'll tell you, we need to go back to laws. And if someone breaks the law, they need to pay the price. Here's the crazy logic too with the whole vaccine thing. It's my body, my choice for abortion, but it's not my body, my choice when it comes to vaccines. Now think about this. It doesn't square. The logic doesn't square with the liberals.
Well, I mean, regarding the fact that, of course, this week, another topic of discussion has been abortion. What's your take on what has happened in Texas?
I personally think, now, obviously I'm a guy, right? So when I was younger, I didn't really have an opinion of this when I was, let's say, in my teens and my 20s. But when I started getting older and more wiser, especially going through this medical curriculum and, studying and how, the whole human development takes place, I'll tell you, I think we as a country are starting to decay because of abortion. Too many abortions are taking place in the country. So I don't know if a complete ban of abortions is the right policy, but definitely second or third term abortions or at birth abortions, I think is totally should be abolished. Of course, saving the life of the mother in rare cases, that's a big ethical question, and I think we should as a medical community revert to saving the mother versus the child if both can't be saved. But that's rare. That's a very rare case. That's not the cases that we're talking about here. These are cases where the woman is deciding to terminate the pregnancy because she doesn't want the child, not because there's something wrong with the child. Now, if there's a developmental defect and it's caught during that, in utero, I think it should be a family decision. The guy and, the father and the mother to make a decision to terminate the pregnancy. It shouldn't be just the female's choice on that. But that's, that they need to decide, do they want to bring a child into the world that may have all these disabilities, and care for that child? It's their choice, but they should have the option, if they wanted to terminate that kind of development disorder, to have that choice. So it's not all or nothing. I think there's some gray area that needs to be considered, but I think there's way too many abortions that are taking place in this country. And this is the reason why this country is losing its prowess, its economic prowess, its spiritual prowess, its can-do spirit, its positivity. The society is spiraling downward, and a big part of it is the metaphysics of this abortions rights issue. So I am in the camp. I prefer pro-life, not pro-death.
Yeah. And regarding what's happening, though, with COVID and all the restrictions that are imposing to eventually mandate this whole thing, I wanted to also point out to you what Canada's largest newspaper this week said. They actually wrote, "Let them die." They said a statement printed in large on per this edition of the Toronto Star said, "I have no empathy for the willfully unvaccinated. Let them die." Will we see really this kind of aggression getting more intense by the vaccinated towards the unvaccinated?
Especially when we move towards the midterm election, because now if you hear in the mainstream media, especially on CNN, they're spinning it as the unvaccinated as Trump supporters. You see, they're trying to make it political. Even Fauci stated a few weeks ago, this is not a political issue. This is a scientific issue. So everyone that's making it political, just take your vaccine. It's not a political issue. People are extremely concerned about the efficacy and the safety of these vaccines long term. Even if the FDA approves a vaccine, it doesn't mean that it's safe. It just means that they approved it. They've approved a lot of drugs, and then they took them off the shelf because they found out that it causes harm. They have a history of that. So to say that just because they stamped approval doesn't mean it's safe. It will probably show, years from now, that, oh, by the way, we created the Hoskins effect. Unfortunately, they didn't listen to our conversation that we just had on how to stop this crazy train from crashing into the wall. So it will become political, especially when we move towards the midterm elections. And this is the way the media divides us, put us in Democrat and Republican categories. And this issue, this is not a Democrat and Republican issue. This is about scientific technocracy and self-determination issue. It has nothing to do with political party affiliation. But they'll try to spin it that way.
Well, the political affiliation, though, is quite clear here. It seems that the left in general is more inclined, worldwide, in pushing.
No, but the reason is why? Because they're probably more willing to follow than to question. See, I think Republicans, libertarians have a tendency to ask why more often.
Sorry, Paul. It seems the only place where this doesn't happen is Israel, where we have a supposedly right-wing guy, prime minister, who in reality is just behaving like all of the rest, So it's like he's just behaving like Trudeau or like Biden or anybody else in this.
Yeah, I mean, there's an international dynamic, and then the U.S. domestic dynamic. I was more focused on the U.S. domestic dynamic. You know, in the international dynamic, if you don't plug into let's say the doctrine of the UN, you're not going to have an easy going as a prime minister, right? You don't have many friends, you know, especially powerful ones. So it's for game theory for him, for the leader in Israel, it's better to game theory and be on the side of these international powerhouses, at least in the short term, and you know, to see if he can get some political clout on the international stage. It'd be different if Trump was in office, because he was a tour de force. You know, he could go head to head with these bodies, you know, the UN or NATO or, you know, Merkel or Trudeau, you know, or even Bojo, you know, at times. We don't have that right now. Biden is weak. We don't have a real world leader. Right now, you have a multitude of leaders. Then they're all kind of monolithic. They're all kind of the same, and they're all reading off of the UN playbook. So from game theory perspective, the only way to survive it, because you don't have any allies, is to somewhat adapt. You know, when in Rome, do as the Romans, as they say. But that may change if Trump can get into office in 2024. Then the dynamic for individuals that want to go against what the UN is proposing, especially with, you know, this ultra globalization type stuff, then you have a powerful ally that you can align with. And that's what you were seeing with Bojo. Bojo was aligning with Trump when Trump showed power. Then all of a sudden, when Trump didn't get reelected, he had to realign himself with Biden. So I don't even know where Bojo's heart really lies, because he's flip-flopped. You know, he was supposed to be pro-Brexit. Well, is he pro-Brexit or not? It's not so clear.
Well,
so, you know,
you have Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and then you have Boris Johnson. It's kind of like it fits into the, you know, the Boris Johnson, the vaccine man, the vaccine. Actually, I was reading the number of people who died though in Great Britain is not so much when it comes to the Delta variant compared to Italy, where Delta instead is now the predominant. Why is that? I mean, Great Britain is full of Indians. It should be the predominant, no? It should be dominating much more, no? So why they're having less people dying there, or what's happening there?
Well, the short answer, we don't know why. But the longer answer to this is that the data, you know, the data is mixed. You know, you have countries like the United States that's somewhat compliant with vaccines. All right, and we're showing Delta surge. We're peaking now, but a Delta surge. Israel, heavily vaccinated, they're showing a Delta surge. India is not showing a Delta surge right now. They showed the Delta surge in their second wave 3 months ago. Why aren't they seeing another wave? They only have 600,000. I think it was around 6 million people that were partially vaccinated. So they should be having
this kit, no? This kit with ivermectin, all kinds of little things. I think it was ivermectin and maybe some other things to fight the
in India.
And it seemed, in India. And it seemed like it was
there's a clinical trial that's actually going on with a mixture of nutraceuticals. It's about a mixture of 10 different nutraceuticals that attack and slow down and act as protease inhibitors and do a whole bunch of things. But it's kind of like the AIDS cocktail, the HIV cocktail, which was like 3 medications in one. This is a nutraceutical that's 10 nutraceuticals in one to try to box in SARS-CoV-2. And the clinical trials were actually in India and showing some very good promise here. So I know actually the guy that owns the company, he's in Spain, that started the company. I'm in contact with him actually. And when I was doing my videos early on in this crisis, we were talking about using certain types of off-the-shelf nutraceuticals that could inhibit 3-CL proteases. And from that series of videos that we did, he took that and spun it and made it even better, and then created a company then did paid for the clinical trials in India. And they were awarded for treatment for SARS-CoV-2 in India. So, you know, that may be part of it. But see, the problem is that it's not so clear cut when you look at the data, why certain countries are faring better for Delta while others are not. Maybe what it is that when Bojo said, you know what, cases are somewhat stable, we're going to open up the society and, you know, and just push through. Maybe, you know, maybe that's evidence for D-Day. And I remember early on in this conversation, we need to push and just do D-Day and just open up the society and stop, you know, being habitual mask wearers and fearful of the bug. Maybe the UK is showing us the way here, that there is one leg of the way for society to handle this is just to push through. And maybe that's, you know, there's a data point for that. But the data point from Israel is worrisome. Now, why, you know, there's something there. You know, antibody-dependent enhancement seems to be taking hold. Why is antibody-dependent enhancement not taking hold in the UK? That to me there's a big question mark. So this is the weird thing about science. This is that you'll go down these roads or alleys, and all of a sudden there's no light of understanding. And that's one of the dark alleys. It's like, why is that happening? Maybe you're right about the dark alley in India, you know, that they're leaning on more off-the-shelf, you know, type remedies and putting them together in kind of like a cocktail, and it's slowing down the infection. I mean, there's some wisdom to that way of treatment, but it shouldn't be the only treatment. There should be a multi-legged approach for the society. There's not one silver bullet for this.
Mm. Well, I mean, we are, of course, this week discussing all these topics, but there is, of course, also you were in New York this week, the weather, the Hurricane Ida then became a tropical storm, but eventually arrived to New York state, and of course hit New York City. Could de Blasio have done something better to stop the deaths of many people caught suddenly? I mean, there was a lot of warning regarding the either going to Louisiana. Everybody was capable of preparing themselves, and there wasn't really that many people who died, at least from what we know up until now. But instead, it was a tragedy where you are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the problem in New York is that the infrastructure underground is old, all right? And money is not being spent because of COVID and the lack of funds. You know, there's budget holes in New York State and New York City because of COVID, because all those businesses were out of business. So you didn't have, you know, taxes, you know, being collected. The drain system isn't being cleaned out. If they clean out the drain system, you would be able to better handle these flash floods. But if you look at the drain system, I've never seen a cleaning crew clean out the drains twice a year or anything like that. So when you have this flash flood, the drain is somewhat clogged. So it's kind of like a clogged artery, right? And let's say you're working out and your blood's pushing through, and then all of a sudden you have a heart attack, right? You know, so something similar is happening in New York City and in all of the boroughs.
And that's because of the incompetence of Mayor de Blasio and his.
I think they needed they need a maintenance protocol followed to make sure that the drain system is clean. when you clean out the drain system, you won't have these
I mean,
flash flood issues.
we had the same problem in Rome. The drainage system not really taken care of, complete disaster, cars flooded, and a lot of damage. But it was pretty incredible to see really what happened also in New Jersey. I mean, a lot of people died. Couldn't they give some kind of warning, you think, in advance? I mean, they always warn us about any stupid event that might occur.
It's very surprising. You know, I think it was two things happening here. Okay, you had in New York City with the 5 boroughs, right? It's a drainage system issue. Now, the airport in Newark, New Jersey, is kind of in a lowland area, so it's prone to flooding. Okay, it's going to flood. Now, there were suburbs that were also flooded in New Jersey. So you got that issue. Now, when we had the hurricane come in the week before, everyone was worried that New York was going to have kind of like this Hurricane Sandy flooding. And people were worried that maybe it'll be at high tide, and the hurricane looked like it was going to hit Long Island, but, you know, because, you know, the hurricane was big, it was going to easily hit New York City, maybe not the eye of it, but you were going to get a lot of rain. So everyone was worried about the flooding from that event the week before. But then as it started shifting east and went to Fire Island, which is just east of Long Island and Montauk, and then it went right into Connecticut and Rhode Island and into Boston. So they were more affected. I think then everyone's guard was put down after that. They were going, oh, we just got past a hurricane, no big deal. And then bam, we get hit with the flash flooding. So I think we had a heightened alert because of the eye of the storm was nearing New York. But then we kind of said, okay, that passed. And then 1 week later, we get hit with the flash flooding. So, you know, they should have been, the government, the emergency system in New York and in New Jersey probably should have had their eye on the ball. They didn't, they weren't watching the ball very well. And I think it's because they said, oh, you know, the hurricane passed, everything's okay. You know, and we just weren't paying attention. And so they should have been paying attention is the point. But the reason why the flash flooding became so bad is because poor maintenance of the drain system. We would not have had as much damage if we had proper drainage. The funds for the proper drainage, you know, for New York and New Jersey.
Well, of course, this is due to an administration that thinks more about the problems of equity, racial, whatever. And,
oh, right. They'll spend money on CRT. They'll spend money on needles for drug users. They'll spend money on everything underneath the sun except some basic sanitary things that we need in New York City. You know?
and unfortunately, we don't see this changing also with the new governor that has succeeded Governor Cuomo, this woman governor that, of course, is being put there to replace him. What do you think of her?
It's kind of too early to tell. I mean, she was pretty much, you know, behind the scenes. She was never like out in public, you know, during Cuomo's administration. I don't think the average New Yorker even knew who she was. And so she's kind of new on the scene, and she's only 2 weeks into her.
But in the meantime, Cuomo's ratings on CNN have dropped. And of course, God knows what's going to happen to this guy who, by the way, they didn't impeach, which means that sooner or later, if they follow the tradition of the Democrats, to just ignore.
Yeah, but he's gonna go through civil lawsuits.
So you don't.
There's gonna be civil lawsuits, and it's gonna be in the news, and you know,
so
maybe they settle out of court.
So he will never be able to. Really,
I think he's going to be tainted.
Office of any kind.
Right. If these women were not suing him in civil court or federal court, then, you know, wait a couple of years, people will forget, and then maybe he would do another run.
Traditional.
Because he wanted the presidency. But I think it's gone. I think there's no way he can get it. It's lost his grip. And it's great that these women are, you know, that have the courage to go through it in the legal system and fight him in court.
I mean, it's great that we got rid of Cuomo. Let's hope we can get rid of Newsom, and maybe we can get rid of.
Well, you know, the thing is this,
other ones like Lightfoot in Chicago, or the governor of Michigan. I mean, there is a lot of these incompetent people.
Oh, yeah. Whitmore is an idiot. Whitmore is a complete idiot. You know, she's the governor of Michigan. And yeah, I think, but there's a lot of these kinds of governors all over the country, you know, that are, you know, promoting very similar policies. You know, it's almost like they have like a red book. Almost like they have the Mao Red Book for the Democratic Party, and then all the governors have to read it, you know, and then state, you know, have policies that fit the Red Book. But we need to get them out. We need to push them out. Now, what's amazing about like chaos theory, 6 months ago or 1 year ago, no one in their right mind would have thought that Governor Cuomo would have been pushed out. Everyone was saying, this guy might be running for the presidency, right? So something emerged in chaos theory. Something emerged in this chaotic system that, you know, this era that we're living in COVID, right? That created a storm and pushed out, you know, one of these types of governors. Something could happen. Going back to the question you said about, you know, can we stop this crazy train? Maybe there'll be an emergent thing that galvanizes the Gen X generation and says, here's another opportunity that you missed last year. Here's another opportunity to actually galvanize and turn the country around and become the great country that we're supposed to be. And that is about self-determination and exploration, not looking down on the ground. When I think of Obama's administration, he wasn't a person that looked up to the sky. You know, he's the one that canceled the shuttle. He's the one that had us, you know, hitch rides with the Russians on rockets to get to the ISS, the International Space Station. You know, so he wasn't a person that looked up. He was always a person that looked down to the ground, you know, and that's a socialist. Socialist looks down on the ground. But we as countrymen of the United States wants exploration, wants self-determination, wants the idea of doing it better, going farther, right? So, you know, that rebirth may come out of this crisis, maybe. So there's a little bit of hope there. There's a little bit of optimism, you know, but there emergent things can happen in odd times. And Governor Cuomo being pushed out, the way he was pushed out, because remember, it wasn't so much the atrocities that he was doing to women that started this. It was the pressure of the nursing home issue with COVID. And then they came out and started saying all the sexual harassment. So in a kind of a way, they used sexual harassment to get at him with the nursing crisis.
So basically, it's a cover-up for a much bigger scandal that could have really ruined much more even the presence of the Democrats in in that state, no? Because of course it would have been connected immediately with the Democratic Party, and so in this way, let's say they got rid of him, but it becomes a more personal thing rather than a party thing, because the issue of sending instead the old folks to the retiring places, no, retiring homes, no, and where they died because they got infected there, and they got they became basically for Governor Cuomo at the time. He was selling himself like he was doing the best job in the world. They even gave him an award, which now has been taken from him, some kind of Emmy award. What was it? An Emmy award of some kind?
I thought it was an Emmy. Yeah, I thought it was an Emmy.
They gave him for basically being a bullshitter, for basically being somebody who was talking out. Yeah, let's not go there and let's not say the word. But I mean,
they gave him an Emmy to read PowerPoints. He read PowerPoints every day, you know.
But this scandal was based on the fact that basically all people should have been sent instead where? How do you think he should have fronted?
They should have put them in the USS Comfort that Trump gave him.
In that ship.
Ship, yeah.
Ship that Trump sent there.
Yeah.
Instead, they ended up dying. How many died? How many thousand died because of this?
You know, I honestly, I don't know. I don't know if it's 15,000. I don't know if it's tens of thousands or if it's just thousands. I think it's like close to 15,000.
Dying. Let me see if I can find the actual exact number. But I mean, this guy doesn't have any ethics or any morals. He doesn't even have a sense of reality. You think he deliberately concealed this death at the nursing homes? What was his problem? I
think there was two. There's two problems.
Huh?
Yeah, I think there was two reasons. One, he didn't want to give any credit to Trump by using the ship. By not using the ship, it made it seem as though he didn't need help from Trump.
A political reason.
Right. And then the other reason was that he was getting a lot of lobbying money through his campaign by the nursing homes in New York City, New York State. So there was kind of like a reason to put them in there so they maintain getting funds. You can't charge for individuals if they're not in your nursing home, right? So if you had a large population that is getting sick and they're being put into other care, then that's lost revenue for the nursing home. Okay. So he was paying homage to the lobbying group that helped him through his campaign financing. So I think it was a combination of two things.
Okay. Combination also of money interest that
right.
So not really incompetence here. We are talking about interest that.
Oh yeah. Oh, this guy is a mobster. This guy is not. He's not incompetent.
I mean,
he's a mobster.
In a way, going back to how the Democratic Party works, if we go to other people of the Democratic Party, like Joe Biden, no. Joe Biden, we might all say he's cognitively speaking not there and all that. But in reality, he's doing exactly what his handlers want, and he's actually helping China all the way with every move he does.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think with Biden, before his cognitive decline, he was selling the country to China. Now he has the cognitive decline, and he has advisors that are selling the country to China.
Okay, so right? Kind of like
so he's just a proxy. He's just a proxy for the ones that are really pulling the strings. And right. He doesn't have the cognitive wherewithal to even question it. But before he had cognitive decline, that boy was all about China. He wanted a 21st century China, and he wanted USA to be number 2 or number 3. Yeah, he wasn't USA number 1 kind of guy at all. No way. And
now the White House is proposing a $65 billion plans to fight future pandemics.
Yeah, I saw that article. You know, I have a pretty strong opinion about this. You know, the Pentagon, especially when we went through the anthrax scare right after 9/11, they must have had some sort of unit within the Pentagon or the Defense Department that's watching these types of biologics around the world. Okay. So I feel as though they already have the capability and they're using that capability. But if you start to pay attention, there is a move on Fox News with these old generals, and these generals were generals during the development of SARS-CoV-2 in the lab at Barracks lab. They're spinning it now as turn a covert biologics operation into an overt biologics operation, meaning because this virus, this virus is out there, we need to have a more military stance to have a response to biologics, either accidental release on purpose or just emerged zoonotic. All right. So they're decloaking and turning a covert operation into an overt operation. And this money is a part of that just turn it into an overt operation. They've been watching this stuff way back. They had a control center. There was a biocom. I don't know what they call it in the Pentagon, but I'll coin the term right with you right now. Biocom. All right. So in biocom, they already had that capability. This is just get more funds to turn the lights on so people realize that we do have a program now. And that way people can't go, well, why are you doing these things? See, right now we're in a situation that we have proof that there was a bioweapon that was developed in the United States. All right. There's proof of that.
Right.
And
let's not forget the role of China, because I mean,
right. No, that's true. That's true. But because the proof of concept started.
People you are basically saying in the United States are all lackeys of China. It's like, I mean, they are basically just extensions of China's interests.
It's a USA CCP virus. It's a USA CCP virus. So Steve Bannon, he's wrong when he just said CCP virus. He's only half right. It's a USA CCP virus.
Yeah, it's definitely a deep state that has worked for years close to China, developing, and then of course completely the development in a foreign country, because that meant that they could avoid a series of restrictions in their hideous experiments. No, that has been.
And let's go back. Let's go back to what was going on in Cuomo's time. My channel was the first channel to live record calling the health department and the governor's office, asking the first 6 cases in Buffalo, New York, why did the CDC not record those? We know that the nurse saw that they tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, because at that time, the PCR went to the CDC and then they would get the results. And they let those 6 individuals into the public. And I called the governor's office and recorded it saying, why doesn't the CDC record those cases? And then shortly after that, the first official cases are in New Rochelle, New York. So there's a bigger story. There's a bigger story about how it was mismanaged in New York City in the first 2 to 3 weeks in February of 2020.
So here we have, of course, also seems the intention of spreading this virus, now a little bit like the Chinese closing the national airport in Wuhan, but not the international one, and so helping the spread worldwide. It's been there was a deliberate intent.
I think so. I think so.
To get to this point. And of course, like I said earlier, to get to what is now, what we are facing now, not only the restriction, I don't think there will be sincerely any future lockdowns at this point. It seems like the interest of the New World Order now is focusing mostly on getting people vaccinated, so the mandate and the vaccine passport to enter this Chinese credit, Chinese
social scoring.
Social scoring system. I think that is their main intention. I don't think there will be further lockdowns. What do you think?
I was expecting that the lockdowns would be starting now in the United States. I was surprised it didn't. The cases are peaked. Yeah, the cases have peaked.
They don't, because their interest is not in locking down. Now it's on keeping open, but saying, no, you can't go in if you're not vaccinated. So you get vaccinated, then you can go into the business. The business itself is demand. There is, like, for example, I'm in Palm Springs. You know, Palm Springs is one of the few places in the US that wants to follow New York and LA in demanding people access to the restaurants and to the bars only if you have some kind of vaccine passport. Palm Springs, it's the only town in the Coachella Valley, meaning that if I take the highway and go 15 minutes down the road, 20 minutes up there, I can go to restaurants that serve you indoors without showing anything. So it's a demented choice that the Desert Sun, which is the local paper, has said this is the proverbial nail in the coffin for Palm Springs, which was already doing very bad. But the crazy thing is, it seems like Palm Springs, because it has a bunch of LGBTQ people in charge, and it's traditionally very inclined towards this LGBT since the time of Liberace, this town has become the mecca of LGBTQ whatever, and so they seem to like it. They seem to like it. They are pushing for it. They kind of demand it, and it's like a big.
You know, it's a kind of straight. Well, I'm noting. I see what you're saying, because I noticed in New York,
it's like 100,000 inhabitants. It's not New York or LA, and it's really.
Yeah, you know what I'm noticing is it's almost like a rite of passage. It's almost what's being developed. It's almost like a rite of passage. People are feeling hip if they have the card or not, the digital card. You know, and if you don't have the digital card, you're not like, or you're not with the times.
Okay, you can have also the
there's a sociological thing going on.
There is also the paper one, and there has been, of course, cases of frauds that have been perpetrated online. Selling these fake vaccine passports has brought a lot of people to jail with very heavy, I mean, like people are trying to survive here in some way, and instead they get jailed for a COVID, for a vaccine passport, fake vaccine passport. I mean, it's insane. I think that Palm Springs is simply because Palm Springs is Palm Springs, and it's one of, you know, the places where people maybe go. And so they say, okay, if you want to go there, it's like going to Disney World or Disneyland, or, you know, you have to have the vaccine passport. I think is, of course, we don't feel it that much because the most of Palm Springs has outdoors dining all year around, and it's warm all year around. So who cares about going indoors? And same with the bars. But I mean, it's kind of like really forcing people, especially because the Riverside County, the local county, has given different directives. So it's kind of.
Well, you know what's there's a sociological dynamic with some of these liberal types, the libtards.
Yeah.
It's, you know, there's a substance within them.
With the LGBTQ, is it because of the AIDS phenomena that they have now this kind of approach where they all want to be vaccinated?
There might be some, you know, echo of HIV and AIDS. That might be a part of the dynamic, might be. I mean, that's a good point that you're making. I was thinking in the sense that they lately, in the last, I don't know, 5 years, there's been a lot of projection you must accept me. It's not that I should have equal rights. I want more rights. I want to be flamboyant. I want to be in your face. I want to be, you know what I mean? So it's like a control mechanism. So it's not about LBG, you know, rights or anything, and equal rights, which they should have, but it's becoming, you should be an LBGT. It's the conversation is switching where they want you to be them. And that was not how it started. And Elton John, who's been well known, you know, to be gay, said that, you know, he said this about almost 10 years ago, but he said that there's a phenomena within this community that is pushing an agenda, not asking for equal rights, but actually wanting to be superior or trying to project their lifestyle on others.
I had a grandmother who was very known in the LGBTQ environment. She actually died of AIDS herself in 1993 in London, in the Lighthouse. So she actually died of it. She had friends like Rock Hudson, because she was teaching acting and stuff, and she was very friends with Rock Hudson, who of course was died of AIDS. So I mean, one of the first people when I came for the first time in the US in 1982 was actually Quentin Crisp, who is like an historical figure in the gay community. So I'm nobody can accuse me of definitely of some kind of being against the LGBTQ community, but I sense a difference from what used to be the community back then, or even when I used to be involved in DJing, in partying, in organizing, and now we used to work and had a lot of friends, and I worked even in gay clubs. I mean, I didn't have a problem, but they were not forcing their own beliefs on me. That was never the case. Once they knew you were heterosexual, that was it. They would respect you, and there was a mutual respect. And that was really what brought me to, and I mean, I got to meet incredible people, people like Kate Hearing. It was my grandmother's neighbor. I mean, I have dedication from Kate Hearing. I mean, it's another historical figure of the gay community. So, I mean, I was really blessed with not having ever, you know, being brought up with the idea they were doing anything wrong. No, we all do things in a different way. I mean, they have made the choice and I respect it. Of course, at the beginning, when I was very young, when I was a little boy, I couldn't really understand it fully. And so I asked my mother, why these two men are together? Who is the man? Who is the woman? I couldn't understand, you know, like a little child has problems in understanding. But you ask, you know, my mother explained a little bit what it meant, you know, and I didn't have a problem. I have a problem now with children not being forced in school to accept this reality, because I think it's going over the top. I think that even people like my grandmother, who were great defenders of the LGBT community and known worldwide, she was working as public relations for William Burroughs and Brian Guy. I mean, William Burroughs, historical person, also another figure I met when I was young. So, but these people, I mean, they were never forcing themselves. And still nowadays, I know a lot of, I have a lot of friends in the gay community who are conservatives, who think in a completely different way from these
well, you know, there was, you know, back in the early 80s that you're talking about, mid 80s, you didn't see, you know, let's say, gay men wearing purses. There's a transhumanism that's taking place. It's bigger than just lesbian and gay rights. I think they should have equal rights. Period. You know, so, you know, but the thing is that what's happening is that there's kind of like almost a transhumanism that's taking place. No, Don't be human. They're trying to like they're pushing this whole like drag queen and
drag queen story hour in school, or I mean, it's insane, and at times it goes over the top. Now, this week, there was, I don't know if you remember, we discussed, I think, this on the show a few months ago. There was a spa in LA where a guy started to, he went, I think, into the, he showed himself, basically. He went into the women's bathroom, thinking, you know, it's normal, showing himself even in front of children. Now it came out this week that then, you know, Antifa went to this spa when there was a clash with the Proud Boys. A week later, there was a confrontation because there was a mother who actually said, why are you letting this guy go around naked in front of little children? Now, this week, it came out that this guy was actually a sex offender.
Right, right. And this is the problem that's going on. What they're doing is these pedophilia types, you know, they're using this whole LBGT, you know, thing, and, you know, and shared bathrooms to do their, you know, their sexual deviance with children. Because on average, when someone has a little child, the guy isn't changing the diaper in the guy bathroom. Almost always it's the female changing the diaper in the female bathroom, right? So, you know, not always, but I mean 90% of the time, right? So this is a conduit of the sexual deviance. That's a major issue. That's a major issue. And people need to start calling them off on it instead of, you know, giving them a safe harbor. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, well, there is unfortunately, and I sense there is unfortunately more and more part of the LGBTQ world, LGBT, whatever you want to call it, that is not condemning enough pedophilia as they should, I think. They are almost closing a blind eye. They are just turning the other way. They say, oh, that guy, he likes them a bit young, or whatever. You know, it's not, that's not the case. I mean, either you are strong in the condemnation, either you are risking to have the whole of the movement then associated with those deviant practices. It's a little bit like the Catholic Church, you know. We had now yesterday the news was filled of former Cardinal McCarrick. You know, he was he arrived in court like that, 91 years old, decrepit, all that. But of course, he is being accused of a terrible crime, and he should be condemned, and he should face the consequences of his actions. And like him, I mean, he's been made an example. I'm sure that there is a lot more in the Catholic Church, because there's a lot of deviancy, unfortunately, in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church became almost a recipient for the people who were inclined with those tendencies, because they could find people to prey on from the seminaries, from the seminars, from the moment in which they were very young. Right. So it's really sad, though. I mean, we hope that things change, but it seems instead that they're not changing. They are trying to normalize it.
I'm starting to think that maybe these movements, the whole end game was to normalize pedophilia.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I don't think that the early gay movement in the 80s in the United States was thinking in those terms at all. But it was hijacked. It was hijacked.
Absolutely. I remember myself, as I told you earlier, I used to DJ, I used to be a record producer, I used to even at times work in gay clubs. I had the sense that something was changing in the early 90s. When I remember one day, there was a journalist I used to know, he said, you know, tonight there will be coming in this club this famous writer from Spain. He was condemned for pedophilia, but he's a very big intellectual, and he should come to this club. And he was, you know, like they were almost holding him in high esteem, like he was some kind of hero, you know. And I was like, are these people sick in their head? I mean, what is that all about?
You know, it's almost there's a similar theme to these types, because even in economics, you know, Marx was considered like this big philosophical guy, right? You know, that was the guy that ushered in communism. Right?
Sure.
You know, so, or, you know, or Lenin, you know, so, you know, these different social circles kind of brings in this intellectual, and then all of a sudden, you know, it spreads like wildfire. So I think you're right. Maybe the hijacking was in the early 90s.
Yeah, it started
the movement
in the early 90s. I had the impression, because especially in cultural circles, you know, when I was starting to study journalism I had this mentor, and he was very much, you know, on top of all the new trends and everything. And when I started hearing about this kind of thing, I was like a little bit like, but isn't this guy a criminal? Shouldn't he be in jail? Are you like giving him an award because he's been like I mean, the fact
right, and you think about it now couple that with what was going on with Epstein. Epstein was starting to take root in the early 90s too.
Yeah.
You know, so there was definitely some data points to prove your thesis here.
Yeah. It's sad because I really used to have no problems with that community, and I still think there is great people in that community. But the fact that it's been hijacked by the pedophilia side has made it, and then also the political. No, I mean, I used to know a lot of the people still nowadays who are conservative, and they're very proud conservative. They're very much conservative in their attitude, in what they thinking about, aside from their sexuality. But things have changed, definitely. So today we have definitely reached the end of our show. We need to, of course, remind our viewers where they can get our products. I promote usually my books. You can find the links on leozagami.com. When it comes to Dr. Paul Cottrell, he has a number of health products you can find on his website, Studio Reykjavik. Something else you want to add to that?
Well, you know, as we're, you know, going through the Delta variant in the United States, you know, it's about trying to boost your immune system. And the best way to do that is proper diet, proper exercise, proper sleep, and proper nutrition. Absolutely. And so you can go to my store and get some really good, high quality health products to neutralize pathogens, boost your immune system, reduce inflammation, and take very strong antioxidants that helps with your health.
And for all the topics we discussed, if you want to know more about some of the things I discussed, this is one of my books, volume 6.66, actually published it early in 2019. I was quite prophetic, as you can see. And then there is also this, which actually is a book I published even later, volume 4, and I also discuss very much all the topics that we discuss on our weekly shows. Thank you very much, Paul. I hope that my health will permit for me to return in for future shows, though I must say that it's a little bit weird to have this sensation. They told me that, like I said, it might come back. So I hope the nerve was not severe. So I'm like that.
It'll take some time, but I have a feeling it will. Just take it easy. But I enjoy these conversations, and I think that the audience does too.
Thank you very much, Paul. Aftermath FM, of course, we're closing now. That was the live show. I just closed it. And of course, we are probably still broadcasting with Global Enlightenment Radio Network. Thank you very much, Paul. Have a great weekend. And,
recording stopped.
Our viewers. Thanks.
Thank you.